Welcome to the Explainer. So let's just dive right in. Today, our big goal is to completely demystify Python. Seriously, if you've ever felt intimidated by coding, we're going to break it down so that reading Python feels just like reading plain everyday English. We're going on a little journey today to build a rock-solid foundation, step by step, using clear, visual building blocks to guide us along the way. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting modules and REPL, variables and data types, the magic of operators, playing around with strings, and finally, lists. All right, so the crucial question. Can you really master Python in a single weekend and instantly land some massive tech celery? Well, let me tell you a quick cautionary tale from our source material about a guy named Balu. So Balu tried to learn Python from the internet in just 2 days, literally expecting to grab a high-paying job immediately. But because he totally skipped the fundamentals, all he ended up with was pure frustration and a computer screen absolutely full of errors. And Balu's story? It perfectly illustrates why we absolutely need to debunk those get-rich-quick tech schemes. Rushing just leads to burnout. Avoiding that frustration requires real patience, bringing your time to the table, and honestly, following a structured sequential path. And you know what? That is exactly what we are doing here today. Now, what's really interesting is the industry consensus on this. According to places like Stack Overflow, Python is consistently one of the most loved languages because its syntax is just so incredibly simple, it literally feels like reading English. It was created back in 1991 by a guy named Guido van Rossum, and he just wanted a short, unique name for it. He was actually watching the British comedy Monty Python's Flying Circus at the time, and well, the name just stuck. It's really meant to be accessible and fun. Okay, section 1, modules and REPL. Let's talk about how we actually talk to the computer. To communicate with Python quickly, we use this thing called REPL. That stands for read, evaluate, print, and loop. You can basically use your terminal like a giant calculator. You type in 5 plus 6, Python reads it, evaluates it to 11, prints that result, and then loops right back, just waiting for your next command. It's that simple. We can also easily pull in code written by other people, which we call modules, using a neat tool named pip. So for example, you could type pip install pyjokes to instantly get a module that generates random coding jokes without you having to write a single line of that complex code yourself. Moving right along to section 2, variables and data types. This is all about storing our information. I want you to think of variables just like containers in your kitchen. You know, you might have a red box that holds sugar and a blue box that holds lentils. Well, in Python, if we write a equals 1, a is just a named memory container that's holding the integer 1. And Python has all these different data types you can put in these containers. You've got integers for whole numbers, floats for decimals, strings for text that you wrap in quotes, booleans for a simple true or false, and even a special none type for when we want a container to explicitly hold absolutely nothing at all. But hold on a second, because you can't just name these containers anything you want. There are some strict rules here. You're allowed to use alphabets, digits, and underscores. However, there are some trapdoors to watch out for. You cannot start a variable name with a digit, so naming something one name will completely break your code. You can't use white spaces, and you absolutely cannot use special characters like the @ symbol. Python actually reserves some of those symbols for its own internal magic, so we have to stay away from them. All right, section 3, the magic of operators. This is where we start manipulating our data. Let's explicitly clear up what is probably the ultimate beginner confusion. A single equal sign is an assignment operator. It basically means take this data and put it into this variable. But a double equal sign, that's a comparison operator. It's asking a Boolean question, are these two things the exact same? And it will only ever reply with true or false. Seriously, committing this difference to memory right now will save you literally hours of debugging later. We also have logical operators to play with, specifically and, or, and not. Let's walk through this truth table real quick. For an and operator to give you a true, both conditions absolutely must be true. But for an or operator to return true, you just need one of those conditions to be true. And not, that one just simply flips the value. True becomes false, false becomes true. It's exactly like building logic gates. On to section 4, playing with strings. Let's manipulate some text. Okay, you've got to look at this massive beginner trap. When you ask a user for an input using the input function, Python will always read it as a string. So if a user types the number 1 and then the number 2, and you try to use the plus operator, Python is not going to do the math for you. Instead, it's going to concatenate them. It just squishes the text together to give you 12. If you actually want to do math, you have to typecast those strings into actual integers using the int function. So how do we pick apart these strings? We use something called indexing. Now, in programming, counting always starts at 0. So if we have the string Harry, the letter H is at index 0. But the cool thing is, Python also lets you count backward using negative indexing. So index -1 is always the very last letter, which here is Y. And here's a great little pro tip for you. If negative numbers confuse you, just map them to their corresponding positive index by counting backward from the very end. We can also grab entire chunks of text using something called string slicing. The syntax looks like this. You open a bracket, put your start index, a colon, your end index, another colon, and then a skip value. Now remember, the start index is included, but the end index is totally excluded. So if you write a slice like 1:6:2 inside your brackets, it starts at index 1, stops right before index 6, and jumps by 2 spaces every time. It's a super fast way to pull specific characters while hopping over others. And strings come packed with some really powerful built-in functions. The len function gets you the total length of the string. The replace function swaps out old words for new ones. Find will give you the exact index of a specific piece of text. We also have these things called escape sequences, like \n, which forces a new line. And brilliantly, Python 3.6 introduced f strings, which are an absolute game changer. You just put an F right before your quotes, and you can inject variables directly into your text using curly braces. It is such an elegant way to solve messy text formatting.
Finally, Section 5, lists, the ultimate containers.
So a list is a container, and we write it using square brackets, and it can hold a sequence of items. But I want to really strongly emphasize how different they are from strings. Unlike strings, which are completely immutable, meaning they cannot be altered once you create them, lists are fully mutable. You can change them on the fly. Plus, they really don't care about matching data types. You can happily store a string like apple, an integer like 5, and a boolean like false, all hanging out in the exact same list. And because lists are mutable, they come with methods that permanently modify the original list. For example, you can use sort to automatically organize your items alphabetically or numerically. You can use reverse to flip the entire order upside down. Append is a super common one. It just tacks a brand new item onto the very end of the list. And if you need an item to go into an exact location, insert squeezes it right into a specific index. You can dynamically build and organize your datasets literally however you want. Okay, we have definitely covered a lot of ground today, all the way from REPL and variables to strings and lists. You now have the absolute fundamental building blocks of Python. Following a sequential, structured path exactly like this one is how you truly master coding without pulling your hair out in frustration. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. With all these tools now right at your fingertips, what are you going to create with your first lines of Python code? Thanks so much for learning with us on this explainer, and we will see you next time.